And
Yeah,
talk about. Yeah.
sure. A lot of people are not 100% familiar with the turbine system. I mean, a model airplane's a model airplane in the sense that it's a two wings, a tail, and a rudder. But the power plant's different. A lot of guys are used to seeing glow engines with propellers, so they kind of get how that works. When I tell people this is a turbine-powered airplane, oh, yeah, turbine-powered. And I go, no, it actually has a turbine engine in it. And you get that look of disbelief, like, how could that possibly be?
Yeah. And
then they start asking questions about how everything works. So what I've got on my table here, where you can't see, but I'll move the camera in a second, is I've got a EvoJet Booster 160 that was in my MB339 and will be going into my composite ARF flash soon. But currently it's not installed, and I thought it'd be a good thing where I could actually take a camera and show you not only the turbine and the inlet and the exhaust and all that stuff, but the components like a fuel pump and the engine control unit and the fuel shutoff valve and those types of things. So,
excellent.
And then explain kind of how all this works. So I'll do that. Now I'm going to take my camera off the top of my PC and kind of sloot around. So Dave, you got to guide me a little bit. If I'm not getting a good shot, you need to tell me. Because I think this is a semi-first for this week in radio control. So I'm reaching up and grabbing it. Okay, here we are, moving around. And while we're at it, there's some of my, I don't know, can you see those helicopters? Yeah, there it is. See, there's some of those helicopters up on my shelf. There's that big Mountain Dew Jet Ranger that I was talking about last week.
Yeah.
And then next to that, over that, you can see there's my Jet Ranger, or actually it's my Long Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the way over in the corner, let's see, up there you can see my Dolphin, my HH-65 Dolphin, which is getting a lot of airtime now. That Gulf oil spill, they keep showing the Gulf down there in Louisiana and Texas, and you always see the Coast Guard flying those little Dolphins like that. So they're cool helicopters. Anyways, so down here on the table, let's see if you can see it. Ah, there it is. You should be able to see a turbine engine sitting there.
Sure can.
So, and we'll turn it sideways like this. So we'll start right at the front of the turbine. You can see this little plastic case sitting out front. Inside of that is a motor, and that motor is used to spin the turbine during the startup sequence because they need to be at a certain RPM assisted before they can self-sustain. So inside of here is like a Speed 400 brushed motor, like an old brushed motor, not a brushless, but a brushed motor. And then it has a Bendix on it. If guys know what a Bendix is, but basically it's a
clutch.
It's a clutch. And that clutch, I'm going to kind of zoom in here a little bit. I don't know if you can see
It's like a one-way clutch, right?
Well, what it is when the motor turns, it turns against a screw set, and that screw set, being helical cut, tries to force the drive out the end of the motor, but it impacts the nut of the turbine. So I got my finger on it. Mm-hmm. The very tip of that nut is knurled up, so there's like a rubber cup in there, and when the motor's engaged, it kind of expends out and locks into the front of the engine. And then once power is removed from the starter, a spring pushes that Bendix back away from the nut here that's on the shaft that's on the front of the turbine, and gets it out of the way, disengages it, and that's pretty important because when the motor at max RPM, the motor's turning like about 30,000 to spin this motor up or spin the turbine up. But when the turbine's at max RPM, it's at 125,000, and of course this motor would immediately explode spinning that fast. So it's good that it disengages. So this little I'll get it centered up again. This little housing right here has an electric motor in it, and it spins onto spins a Bendix that engages the front of the turbine. And let me see if I can get more in there. I don't know. Can you see okay, Dave?
Yep.
How's that look?
Yep.
So you can see. And then right here in the very front of the motor is the compressor. I'm turning it. I don't know if you can see that turning around in there.
Yep, sure can.
And it consists. They used to, back when turbines first started, they used to use compressor wheels off of turbochargers for a car, and they would just mill them down and kind of change them around and make them work for the intended purpose. But now we use actually purpose-built, forged turbine wheels. And that's what you see here on this engine. You can see it in there. So this is the inlet. Air goes in through there, obviously. And then we'll go to the exhaust. I'm going to hold that up a little bit. I don't know if you can see in there. You might be able to see those turbine buckets in there, and then you can see the exhaust cone. So the hot air comes out the back, obviously, and you'll notice that we have a little bit of a cone here, and you can see in a side view, you can see that that cone is convergent. So it kind of compresses down. And what that does is it raises the exhaust gas velocity because you have to force a large volume of air through an ever-decreasing area. So to get it through, it has to speed up, and that's what helps produce some thrust. So inlet and exhaust, and then on the engine itself, a lot of turbines have an external, and if you guys are looking at them in airplanes, you'll see them. They'll be like an external wire that runs along the side of the engine here, and then kind of goes goes through this exhaust cone and sticks into the exhaust gases. And what that is an EGT probe, an exhaust gas temperature. The Booster 160, and matter of fact, all the booster engines have an internal EGT probe, so you can't actually see it here. It's inside of here, and it would be difficult for you to see with the camera because doesn't have the resolution, but it's in there. But you might see a jet cat that's got a probe along the side of it, and that wire, if you see it, that's what that is. It's an EGT probe, and it'll be like a solid little piece of music wire. It'll look like that, and then it'll have wires on the end of it coming off to some type of plug. And then on the engine itself, you have a couple of connections. Now, the difference about the Booster 160 compared to, like, say, a jet cat is you could see this one Festo connection right here. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's right there. And that's where fuel goes into the engine. This engine's kerosene start, so it doesn't have another one of these connections for propane. But some engines are propane start, and they'll have two connections. They'll have one like this one for fuel, and they'll have another one at another location along the ring here. Sometimes they're on the inlet. Jet Cats have them on the front here. They come straight in. Ours come in at a 90. But Jet Cat comes in the front. And the second connection is for propane, or it could be for kerosene as well for the kerosene start system. Now, this engine has one fuel line connection, and then it breaks off in a Y, and there's an electronic valve inside that sends fuel to the kerosene start mechanism internally. Some engines don't have that. They have the kerosene start feed on the outside. But the two Festo connectors are one's for fuel, and the other one's either for fuel for the kerosene start or fuel for propane. Not fuel, but gas, propane gas. And then right behind that, you'll see one of those multiplex plugs, those green multiplex plugs. I'm sure you're familiar with those, Dave.
Sure.
And that plug right there does two things. It provides power for the starter, and it also provides voltage to the glow plug that's inside this engine that you can't see either for the kerosene start. Now, some propane start engines will have a glow plug, like a model airplane glow plug, if you will, right on the outside of the case. And then there'll be a wire coming from underneath the hood here to that glow plug to glow for your propane start. And then some of the older kerosene start engines like Jet Cat, their earlier versions that don't have internal Kero start, they would have their kerosene glow plug sitting on the side of the engine as well. But this plug right here, all it does is supply voltage to spin the motor, and it supplies voltage to light that plug, and that's it. Once the start sequence is completed, there's no voltage on this plug whatsoever. And then lastly, but not leastly, you'll notice this little, it's an RJ11 for those who are in the telephone industry, but it's basically a telephone jack plug, and it's either 6 or 8 pins, or 4 or 6 pins, and cable plugs right in there. I don't have a cable handy, but it looks like a regular telephone cable. Plugs right in here.
What's that
and what
for?
This is all the data from the engine, all the operating